My son whispered through his teeth, "Don't cry, save your tears for later. I'll keep the house and the company." My daughter-in-law sneered, "We'll also take your dignity." The judge opened my envelope, read the content and started laughing. "What are you laughing at?" my son asked, confused. The judge smiled ironically. "Karma, my dear, you've just dug your own grave." Before we continue, please subscribe to Granny's Voice channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are watching from now. We might give you a shout out in our next video. Today's shout out goes to Latany from Tucson, Arizona. Thank you for being part of this great family. Now let me tell everything. When Judge Harrison opened the envelope I had placed in front of him, something in his expression shifted. First it was surprise, then disbelief, and finally he began to laugh. It was a stifled laugh at first, but it grew until it filled the entire courtroom. My son, Ryan, sat bolt upright in his seat. Vanessa, my daughter-in-law, pressed her lips into a thin, pale line. "What's so funny?" Ryan asked, his voice trembling, losing for the first time that mask of confidence he had worn throughout the trial. The judge looked up from the document, glanced at me with something that looked like respect, and then fixed his eyes on my son and the woman who had turned my only child into a stranger. He smiled with irony, the kind of smile you only use when justice is about to be served in the most perfect way possible. "Karma, my dear boy," the judge said with absolute calm. "You dug your own grave. But for you to understand how I got here, sitting in this courtroom watching the life I built about to be stolen by the two people who should have loved me most, I need to go back in time a little. I need to tell you how a mother who gave everything ended up being seen as a burden. How a company I built with my own two hands became the spoils of war for my own flesh and blood. It all started 22 years ago when Thomas, my husband, the love of my life, was sitting with me in our tiny kitchen. The house was modest back then. We had an old wooden table, mismatched chairs, and a coffee pot that sputtered more than it brewed. But we had dreams, huge dreams that seemed impossible for two immigrants who barely spoke the language and worked double shifts just to pay the rent. "Margaret," Thomas told me that night, holding my hand across the ink-stained table, "we're going to build something that lasts longer than we do, something Ryan can inherit with pride." He had that brilliant look in his eyes that always made me believe anything was possible. Ryan was just an 8-year-old boy then, sleeping in the next room in his worn-out pajamas, dreaming of being an astronaut. He was innocent. He was pure. He was our everything. Thomas had worked for years in construction, learning every detail of the business from the ground up. I did the books for 3 families in the neighborhood to earn a little extra. We saved every dime. Every single dime. And finally, after 5 years of sacrifice, we scraped together the $15,000 needed for the down payment on our first project. A small renovation of an abandoned house on the edge of town. "If this works," Thomas told me with that smile that could light up the darkest days, "we can give Ryan the life we never had." And it worked. Not because we were lucky, not because anyone handed us anything. It worked because we worked 18-hour days. Because Thomas learned to negotiate with suppliers in a language that still felt clumsy on his tongue. Because I learned to read contracts until my eyes ached. Because we refused to give up even when banks slammed their doors in our faces. We sold that first house we renovated for a profit of $8,000. It wasn't much, but it was ours. It was proof that we could do it. We reinvested every penny. We bought another property, then another, and another. Ryan grew up watching his father come home with his hands covered in coal and dust, but always with a smile, watching me go over numbers at that kitchen table until well past midnight, learning, or so I thought, that the value of things is measured in effort, not appearances. "Mom, when I grow up, I'm going to work with you and Dad." Ryan would tell me during our Sunday dinners, "We're going to be the best." And I believed him. I believed him because he was my son. Because he had Thomas's eyes and my determination. Because I thought that blood truly meant loyalty. When Ryan was 15, we already had a small company. Nothing impressive yet, but it was ours. Thomas and Margaret Construction. Read the sign we had made. It was the proudest day of our lives. That sign represented every lost hour of sleep, every simple meal, every time we said no to a whim to say yes to an investment. Ryan was with us the day they installed it. I remember how he looked at that sign with admiration, as if he were seeing the future that awaited him. But then, when Ryan was 18 and about to start college, everything changed in a split second. Thomas was inspecting a job site when a poorly secured beam gave way. He didn't suffer. That's what the doctors told me. As if that made it any easier to accept that the man who had built my world was gone. As if he didn't suffer, could fill the void he left in our house, in our bed, in every single corner of my life. The funeral was a blur of sympathetic faces and empty words. But I remember perfectly when Ryan hugged me in front of his father's coffin and whispered, "We're going to carry on his legacy, Mom. I promise. Together." At that moment, with my heart shattered and my future uncertain, those words were the only thing that kept me standing. I thought Thomas had left two valuable things in this world. A company with potential and a son who would honor his memory. How wrong I was. After the funeral, I threw myself into work as if it were the only thing keeping me alive. And in a way, it was. Every morning I got up at 5, reviewed contracts, called suppliers, visited job sites. Thomas had taught me everything. But now I had to apply it alone, without his advice, without his hand on my shoulder telling me, "You're doing great, honey." The first few months were devastating. Some clients doubted that a woman could run the company. Some contractors tried to cheat me, thinking I was vulnerable. One even told me to my face, "Mrs. Margaret, with all due respect, maybe you should sell this and retire. This is no world for a woman alone." I proved him wrong. I finished that project 2 weeks ahead of schedule and $5,000 under budget. When I handed the keys to the client, I saw in his eyes the same respect they used to give Thomas. And I knew I could do it. Not just for me, for Ryan, for the future his father had dreamed for him. Ryan was in college studying for his business degree. I called him every night to tell him about the projects, the challenges, the small victories we were accumulating. "I'm so proud of you, Mom," he would tell me over the phone. And I would fall asleep to those words, feeling that all the sacrifice was worth it. On the weekends he came home, I would take him to the job sites. I taught him what Thomas had taught me. How to read the lay of the land. How to negotiate firmly but fairly. How to treat the workers with dignity because they were the backbone of everything. "One day all of this will be yours, son," I would tell him as we walked through one of our construction sites. "But I want you to value it, to understand that every brick here represents sweat, tears, and determination." He would nod seriously. He seemed to understand. He seemed to appreciate every lesson. For 3 years, the company grew steadily. We went from 5 employees to 22. From small renovations to building entire houses, we opened a savings account that grew to $150,000. I bought the house where Thomas and I had dreamed of living. One day, a beautiful property with a yard, 3 bedrooms, and enough space for Ryan to bring his future family. "This house is yours, too," I told him the day we moved in. "You will always have a place here." But then, in his senior year of college, Ryan met Vanessa. At first, she seemed like a normal girl, pretty, polite, with a smile that showed perfect teeth and calculating eyes that I didn't yet know how to read. The first time she came to dinner, she sat at our table and looked around with an expression I couldn't decipher then. Now, I know it was disdain. She was sizing everything up like a cold appraiser, measuring the value of her future investment. "Mrs. Margaret, Ryan has told me so much about you," she said in a sweet voice as she cut her steak with delicate, precise movements. "It must be very difficult to run a company. Being a woman and at your age," she was 23 then, I was 52. "At your age" sounded like an insult disguised as concern. But I smiled because I wanted to believe my son had chosen well, that this girl would make him happy. "Age gives you experience, Vanessa," I replied calmly. "And experience is worth more than any college degree." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Ryan seemed captivated by her. He looked at her as if she were the most precious thing he had ever seen, and I as a mother wanted him to be happy. So I kept my reservations to myself. I ignored the small voice in my head telling me something wasn't right. They got married 6 months after graduation. It was a modest but elegant wedding. I paid for everything. The venue, the catering, The lavender flowers she insisted on having because they represented sophistication. I spent $28,000 on that day. I didn't care. He was my only son, my only family, and if spending that money made him happy, it was worth every penny. During the ceremony, when I saw them exchange vows, I cried. I cried because Thomas wasn't there to see his son become a man. I cried because I felt I was losing Ryan in a way I couldn't explain. And I cried because deep in my heart, I already knew Vanessa was not who she pretended to be. The honeymoon was in Europe. 2 weeks touring cities I had never seen. Ryan sent me photos. Them in front of the Eiffel Tower eating pasta in Rome, walking the streets of Barcelona. In every picture, Vanessa looked radiant. Ryan looked different, as if he were already being molded into someone I didn't recognize. When they returned, I offered to let them live in my house while they saved up for their own. There's plenty of room, I told them. And this way, Ryan can learn more about the company by working closely with me. Vanessa accepted with a smile that I now know was pure strategy. They moved into the guest room. The first week was tolerable, the second uncomfortable. By the third, she had established unspoken rules in my own home. She rearranged my kitchen without asking. She moved the furniture around because it looked too dated. She started cooking elaborate, expensive dishes and then would comment in front of Ryan. "It's a shame your mother only knows how to make such simple food." She said it casually as if commenting on the weather, but the poison was there. Ryan officially started working at the company. I gave him the title of operations manager, a $70,000 a year salary, access to all the accounts, complete trust because he was my son because he had promised to carry on his father's legacy. The first few months he worked well. He arrived early, checked the job sites, treated the employees well. I was proud. I thought we were finally building together what Thomas had dreamed of. But Vanessa began to plant seeds subtly. During dinners, she would comment, "Ryan, honey, you should have more authority in the company. After all, you have a college degree. Your mother only has experience." Or, "Don't you think it's time to modernize things? Your mother is very stuck in her old ways." At first, Ryan would defend me. "Mom knows what she's doing, Vanessa." But over time, those defenses grew weaker. Vanessa's comments became more frequent, more direct, and Ryan began to nod instead of contradicting her. A year after the wedding, Vanessa got pregnant. I thought that would soften things, that motherhood would make her more human. I was wrong again. Vanessa's pregnancy was like a stage play where she was the undisputed star and everyone else was the audience forced to applaud. Every bout of morning sickness was an epic drama. Every craving a national emergency. And Ryan, my son, the same boy who had watched his father work while sick without ever complaining, ran to satisfy her every whim like a servant instead of a husband. "Ryan, I need imported strawberries. The regular ones make me nauseous," Vanessa would say, lounging on my living room sofa, one hand on her barely there bump and the other holding her phone like a royal scepter, and Ryan would rush out to find them, no matter if it was 11 o'clock at night or if they cost $30 for a small box. I tried to help. I cooked nutritious meals. I offered to drive her to her doctor's appointments. I asked her how she was feeling, but my every gesture was met with barely concealed disdain. "Margaret, I appreciate the thought, but my doctor says I have to eat organic. This food you cook has too many preservatives," she told me one afternoon, pushing away the plate I had prepared with so much love. Ryan said nothing. He just looked away as if he didn't want to see his wife disrespecting me in my own house. That was the first time I felt I was truly losing my son. Not physically, but in his very essence. During those months, Vanessa quit her job. She had been an administrative assistant at a small office, but now she claimed the pregnancy was too delicate to be stressed with unnecessary work. She stayed home all day, reorganizing my spaces, criticizing my decorating choices, and whispering things to Ryan that I couldn't quite hear, but could imagine. "Your mother is so controlling," I heard her say one night when they thought I was already asleep. "She doesn't let you make any real decisions at the company. She always has the last word. When are you going to be the real boss, Ryan?" My son sighed. A long weary sigh that broke my heart. It's her company, Vanessa. She built it with my father. She corrected him, her voice sharp. And your father is gone. That company should be yours by right. You're her only son, her heir. But she treats you like just another employee. I wanted to burst into that room and scream all the truths she deserved to hear. But I stood frozen in the hallway, holding my breath, feeling my world begin to crack. They named the baby girl Emma after Vanessa's grandmother. They didn't even consider a name that would honor Thomas. When they told me, I smiled and said it was a lovely name. But inside, something else broke. That child was my granddaughter. My blood, the extension of Thomas's legacy. But from the very first moment, Vanessa made it clear that I would be a grandmother only on her terms. Margaret, please wash your hands with sanitizer before you touch her, she ordered the first time I wanted to hold Emma. And don't kiss her on the face. I don't want you passing on any germs. I tried to be patient, to understand that she was a new mother protecting her child. But when I bought clothes for the baby, Vanessa looked at them with disgust and said, "They're cute, but they're not the brand we use. Emma only wears certified organic." That outfit she rejected had cost $60. I had chosen it with so much love, imagining my granddaughter wearing it, but Vanessa left it in a donation box as if it were trash. Ryan still said nothing. His silence had become his answer for everything. 2 months after Emma was born, Vanessa dropped the bomb. We were at dinner, the four of us, at the same table where Thomas and I had built so many dreams. Vanessa delicately wiped the corner of her mouth with a napkin and then said casually, "Margaret, Ryan and I have been thinking. This house is too big for you all alone, and we need more space now with Emma. Don't you think it would make sense for us to stay in the house and for you to find something smaller, more manageable?" My fork fell from my hand. The clatter of metal against the plate sounded like a gunshot in the sudden silence. "I'm sorry" was all I could manage to say. Ryan coughed uncomfortably. Vanessa continued as if she were proposing something perfectly reasonable. "Think about it, Margaret. You're 63 years old now. Keeping up a house like this is a lot of work. We're young. We have energy. And Emma needs room to grow. Besides, Ryan is the one really running the company now. It makes sense for him to live in a house that reflects his position." I felt the blood rush to my head. 63 years old. As if I were some decrepit old woman incapable of taking care of her own house. The house I had bought with the money I earned through my own hard work. The house where every corner held a memory of Thomas. "This is my house," I said, my voice trembling but firm. "I bought it. It's in my name and I have no intention of going anywhere." Vanessa's lips tightened. That mask of sweetness cracked for a second and I saw the real contempt in her eyes. "Well, it's just a suggestion. For now." The way she said "for now" sounded like a threat. That night, Ryan came to my room. He knocked softly on the door and when I opened it, he had that guilty child expression he used to get when he broke something as a boy. "Mom." Vanessa didn't mean it in a bad way. "Oh, really? Then what way did she mean it?" I asked, crossing my arms. Ryan sighed. "It's just, well, she has a point about some things. This house is big, and we do need more space. Then find some. Buy your own house. I can help you with the down payment if you need it." "The down payment?" he repeated with a bitter laugh I didn't recognize. "Mom, I should own half the company. Dad built it just as much as you did. But everything is in your name." Everything. There it was. The real issue. The poison Vanessa had been injecting drop by drop for 3 years had finally taken full effect. "Ryan," I said, trying to stay calm. "Your father and I built this company together. That's true. But when he died, I was the one who kept it alive. The one who worked day and night so it wouldn't go under, the one who risked everything. And I did it for you. So that one day you could inherit something solid, not ruins. But that one day. When is that coming, Mom? When you're 80, 90? I'm 29 years old. I have a family. I need to build my own legacy now. Not wait for you to decide it's time." Every word was a stab. This wasn't my son talking. This was Vanessa using his mouth. "If you need more responsibility at the company, we can talk about it. If you need a raise, we'll consider it. But the company is not for sale, Ryan, And neither is this house. He stared at me for a long moment. Then he shook his head with an expression of disappointment that shattered me. Vanessa was right. You're selfish. You only think about yourself. And he walked out of my room, leaving me trembling with anger and pain. That night, I cried for the first time since Thomas's funeral. I cried because I realized I had lost my son to a woman who only saw dollar signs where there should have been love. The following weeks were a silent hell. Vanessa and Ryan barely spoke to me. When they did, it was with the cold, formal politeness one uses with annoying strangers. They stopped having dinner with me. They stopped including me in plans with Emma. I became an unwelcome tenant in my own home. At the company, things got worse, too. Ryan started making decisions without consulting me. He hired 2 new people without my approval. He switched suppliers we had worked with for years for cheaper, less reliable ones. When I confronted him, he said, "I'm the operations manager, Mom. These decisions are part of my job." "But I'm still the owner," I reminded him, "and important decisions are run by me." He laughed, a dry, unpleasant laugh. "You know what the problem is, Mom? You'll never let go of control. You're going to hang on to that company until it falls from your cold, dead hands." Those words echoed in my head for days. Cold, dead hands. As if I were already in my grave, as if my very existence was just an annoying obstacle between him and what he thought he deserved. It was in July of that year that I discovered the first real lie. I was reviewing the company's bank statements, something I did religiously every month, when I noticed a strange transfer. $50,000 had been moved from the main account to an account I didn't recognize. The description read, "External Consulting." I called Ryan into my office. He walked in with that defensive posture he had adopted in recent months, arms crossed and jaw tight. "What is this?" I asked, pointing to the bank statement. He didn't even look at the paper. "It's exactly what it says. I hired a consultant to analyze our operations and suggest improvements. A $50,000 consultant without consulting me? I already told you, Mom. I'm the manager. I make operational decisions. Either you trust me or you don't. I want the consultant's name and the reports that justify this payment," I said, keeping my voice firm, though inside I felt something was very wrong. Ryan smiled smugly. "You'll get them eventually." And he walked out of my office, leaving me with a bad feeling that gnawed at my gut. That night, when everyone was asleep, I went down to my study and started going through every document, every record, every transaction from the last 6 months. What I found took my sleep away for good. There were more transfers. Payments to companies that didn't exist when I looked up their names online. Invoices for services never rendered. Inflated expenses. Ryan was systematically siphoning money from the company. They weren't huge amounts each time, but added up they came to almost $200,000. My own son was stealing from me. And worst of all, he was doing it with my forged signature on several documents. I felt the floor open up beneath my feet. How had it come to this? How had the boy I raised, Thomas's son, become this? I spent 3 days reviewing everything, checking every detail, making sure it wasn't a mistake or misunderstanding. But it wasn't. It was fraud. It was betrayal. It was my son destroying everything his father and I had built. When I finally confronted him, we weren't alone. Vanessa was with him as always, like the dark shadow that had turned him into someone unrecognizable. "Ryan, I need you to explain this," I said, placing the documents on the dining room table. "All these transfers, these fake invoices. What's going on?" I expected shame. I expected denial. I expected at least some guilt in his eyes. But what I saw was absolute coldness. "You've been spying on me." "It's not spying to review the accounts of my own company," I replied, my voice rising for the first time in months. "Your company." Vanessa laughed. A sharp, unpleasant sound. "That's exactly the attitude we're sick of, Margaret. Your company, your house, your money, everything is yours. But Ryan works just as hard as you. He deserves what he's taking." Taking. Is that what you call theft now? Ryan shot to his feet, knocking his chair back. His face was red with rage. It's not theft to take what belongs to me. Dad built that company just as much as you did. That money is my inheritance. Your father died 11 years ago, Ryan, and I kept that company alive. I made it grow. You came in 3 years ago with a college degree and zero experience. I gave you a position, a generous salary, opportunities, and this is how you repay me. By stealing from me. I'm not stealing from you. He spat the words out like venom. I'm taking what you should have given me years ago. If you were a decent mother, you would have already signed the company over to me. But no, you have to cling to everything like a bitter old woman who can't accept she's useless now. The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear my own heart breaking into 1,000 pieces. Vanessa smiled, satisfied, as if she had finally won a battle she had been fighting for years. That's telling her, honey, she said to Ryan, stroking his arm. It's about time you told her the truth. I stared at my son, searching for any trace of the boy he had once been, of the young man who had hugged me at his father's funeral, promising to carry on his legacy. But that boy was dead. And in his place was a stranger who hated me for not handing him everything on a silver platter. I want you out of my house, I said, my voice broken but firm. Now. Vanessa laughed again. Your house. Margaret, honey, let me explain something to you. We're not going anywhere. You're the one who's leaving, and you're going to voluntarily sign the company over to us because if you don't, we will legally prove that you are no longer fit to run it. Excuse me. You heard me. Ryan crossed his arms with a newfound arrogance. We have documentation of mistakes you've made in recent months. Questionable financial decisions, confusion with numbers, frequent forgetfulness. I felt the room spin. You're lying. I haven't made any mistakes. Oh, really? Vanessa took out her phone and started swiping. Then explain why you signed a duplicate contract with a material supplier last month, or why you authorized a payment twice to the same company, or why you forgot 3 important client meetings. Every word was a carefully constructed accusation. And then I understood they had been planning this, documenting mistakes they had probably fabricated themselves, creating a fake file to have me declared incompetent. No judge is going to believe those lies, I said, though my voice trembled. Are you sure? Vanessa stepped toward me slowly, like a predator cornering its prey. You're 63 years old, Margaret. You're an older widowed woman all alone. We're young. We have a family and Ryan has a formal business degree. Who do you think they're going to believe? The stubborn old lady who can't let go? Or the concerned son who only wants to protect the family business? The word old lady hit me like a slap. That's what they really thought of me. Not a successful businesswoman. Not the woman who had built an empire with her own hands. Just a burdensome old woman who didn't know when to step aside. Besides, Vanessa continued with that cruel smile. We have a doctor willing to evaluate your mental health. Dr. Hartwell. You know him. He's a friend of my father's. Very respected, and he's concerned about the early signs of dementia that Ryan has described to him. This is unbelievable, I whispered, feeling tears well up in my eyes. How far are you willing to go? As far as it takes, Ryan answered without a shred of emotion. This doesn't have to be hard, Mom. Sign the papers, transfer the company and the house to us, and we'll give you a monthly pension of $3,000 so you can live comfortably in some small apartment. It's more than most people your age have. $3,000 for a company worth over $2 million, for a house that cost $700,000, for a lifetime of work and sacrifice. And if I don't sign, you'll take me to court, you'll have me declared insane if we have to. Vanessa shrugged indifferently. Or you can do this the easy way. The choice is yours. I stood there trembling with rage and helplessness, watching as the 2 people who were supposed to love me stripped me of everything without the slightest remorse. Ryan, my only son, the reason I had endured years of loneliness and hard work, looked at me as if I were trash to be thrown away. Get out of my sight, I told them with what little dignity I had left. Now. They left laughing. I heard them go up the stairs. I heard them close their bedroom door. I heard them celebrate their anticipated victory. And I was left alone in that living room, in that house I had bought with my dreams, feeling like my heart had been ripped from my chest. But that night, as I cried in my room, I made a decision. I would not be their victim. I would not hand them everything without a fight. If they wanted a war, they would get one. But this time, I was going to play by my own rules. The next morning, I did something I never thought I would have to do. I hired a lawyer who specialized in corporate fraud and family law. His name was Attorney Bennett, a man in his late 50s with a reputation for being ruthless in court. When I walked into his office with my folders full of documents, he looked at me with the expression lawyers use when they know a case is going to be messy. "Mrs. Margaret, I need you to tell me everything from the beginning," he said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. And so I did. I told him about Thomas, about how we built the company, about my husband's death, and how I kept everything running. I told him about Ryan, about Vanessa, about the gradual manipulations that had led me to this point. I showed him the financial documents, the fraudulent transfers, the fake invoices. "This is clear-cut fraud," Attorney Bennett said after reviewing everything for nearly 2 hours. "But I need to ask you something important. Margaret, are you prepared for what's coming? Because if we proceed with this, you're going to have to face your son in court. You're going to have to testify against him. It's going to be painful." I was silent for a moment, thinking of the boy Ryan had been. Of the hugs, the promises, the dreams we had shared. But that boy was gone. And the person he had become was destroying everything his father and I had loved. "I'm prepared," I answered firmly. "My husband didn't work himself to death for our son to destroy his legacy. Do what you have to do." Attorney Bennett nodded with respect. "All right, we're going to need more evidence. I want you to install security cameras in your house and in your office. With audio. I need to document every conversation, every threat, every admission of guilt they might make." "Is that legal?" I asked. "In your own home and office. Completely legal. Especially if you suspect criminal activity. What your son is doing isn't just immoral, Margaret. It's a federal crime. He could go to prison." The thought of Ryan in prison made my stomach turn. But then I remembered his face full of contempt. His cruel words, the way he called me a useless, bitter old woman, and I felt my heart harden. For the next 3 weeks, I followed my lawyer's instructions to the letter. I hired a security company that installed discrete cameras in the common areas of the house and in my office. Tiny devices that looked like smoke detectors or decorative clocks. No one suspected a thing. And I began to document everything. Every dismissive comment from Vanessa, every questionable financial decision from Ryan, every conversation where they planned their next moves. Attorney Bennett was right. When people think they've already won, they get careless. Vanessa and Ryan spoke openly about their plans, convinced I was a defeated old woman who would soon sign whatever they wanted. One night, I captured the conversation I needed. They were in the living room drinking wine they'd bought with the company credit card, celebrating in advance. "In 2 months, this will all be ours," Vanessa said, lounging on my sofa with her shoes on my coffee table. "The old woman has no options. Either she signs voluntarily or we have her declared incompetent. We win either way. What if she fights back?" Ryan asked. His voice sounded slightly worried, as if a shred of conscience still remained in some dark corner of his soul. "She can't fight back," Vanessa laughed. "Dr. Hartwell has already prepared the psychiatric report. It'll say she has early onset dementia, that she's unfit to make financial decisions. No judge will side with a woman her age against us, and the lawyer reviewing the documents won't notice the signatures are forged. Ryan, honey, your mother is 63 years old. Her signature isn't as steady as it used to be. It's perfectly believable that she signed those documents in a moment of confusion. Besides, we have witnesses who will say they saw her sign them." "What witnesses?" "The ones I hired, obviously. 2 employees who need the money and will say exactly what I tell them to say. For $5,000 each, they'll swear to whatever is necessary." I listened to that conversation from my room with headphones plugged into the monitoring system, and I felt a mix of horror and satisfaction. Horror at confirming just how far they were willing to go. Satisfaction because every word was being recorded in high definition. The next day, I took the recordings to Attorney Bennett. He listened, his expression growing more serious by the minute, taking meticulous notes. When he finished, He leaned back in his chair and whistled softly. Margaret, this is pure gold. A confession of fraud, conspiracy to commit perjury, admission of forgery. With this, you don't just get your company back. You can have them face criminal charges. I don't want him to go to prison, I said, a lump forming in my throat. He's my son. I just want him to return what he stole and get out of my life. The lawyer looked at me with understanding. I get it. But you need to understand something. They won't be so merciful with you. They are planning to completely destroy you, take everything, have you declared incompetent, leave you with nothing. He was right, and I knew it. But he was still my son, the child I had held in my arms, who I had comforted after nightmares, who I had raised with all the love a mother can give. Proceed with the case, I finally said. But let's give them a chance to back down. One last chance to do the right thing. Attorney Bennett nodded. As you wish, but prepare for the worst, because when greed takes hold of people, family love is the first thing to go. A week later, my lawyer sent a formal letter to Ryan. In it, he detailed all the financial irregularities found, demanded the immediate return of the siphoned funds, and warned that if there was no satisfactory response within 10 days, legal proceedings would follow. The reaction was immediate and violent. Ryan stormed into my room that night, the crumpled letter in his hand, his face twisted with rage. How dare you, he shouted, throwing the paper on my bed. How dare you threaten me with lawyers? I'm your son. A son who is stealing from me, I replied, keeping my voice steady, though I was trembling inside. A son who plans to have me declared insane to take everything I've worked for. Because it's mine by right. Dad would have wanted it this way. Your father would have wanted you to be an honest man, to work hard, to respect what he and I built, not to destroy it out of greed. Vanessa appeared in the doorway, holding Emma. She used my granddaughter as a shield, knowing it would hurt me to see her in the middle of this conflict. Margaret, I think you're making a huge mistake, she said, her voice soft but threatening. If you take this to court, we're going to have to defend ourselves, and our defense will include medical testimony about your mental state. Do you really want your granddaughter to grow up hearing that her grandmother was declared mentally incompetent? Do you really want to use that child as a weapon? I asked, feeling sick. You're the ones making this ugly, Ryan shot back. We just wanted a peaceful transition. But if you want a war, you'll get one. And we are going to destroy you, Mom. We will take everything from you. The house, the company, your dignity, everything. Those words hung in the air like a death sentence. And in that moment, I knew there was no turning back. My son had chosen his path, and I had to choose mine. You have 10 days to return the money, I said with absolute calm. After that, I'll see you in court. Ryan spat on my floor. He literally spat like a wild animal. See you in court, old woman, and you're going to lose everything. They stormed out of my room, slamming the door. That night, I knelt by my bed, and for the first time in years, I prayed, not for myself, but for the soul of the child I had lost, for the son I had raised, who no longer existed, and for the strength to face what was coming. The 10 days passed with no response. No apology, no return of the money, no attempt to negotiate, just hostile silence and hateful glares. Attorney Bennett filed the formal lawsuit. And 3 days later, I received the countersuit. Ryan and Vanessa were suing me for mental incapacity to manage the company, requesting that I be declared legally incompetent and that full control be transferred to them. They attached Dr. Hartwell's report full of false diagnoses and fabricated observations. They attached statements from Derek and Stephen, 2 employees who swore they had seen me confused and disoriented. The trial date was set for 3 months later. 3 months that felt like both an eternity and the blink of an eye. During that time, the house became a silent battlefield. Ryan and Vanessa stopped pretending to have any sort of cordiality. They treated me as if I were invisible, except when they needed to remind me that I was about to lose everything. I hope you're looking at apartments, Vanessa said to me one morning while making breakfast for Emma. Because after the trial, you're going to need one, a small, cheap one to match your new situation. I didn't answer her. I had learned that every word I said would be twisted and used against me. Attorney Bennett worked tirelessly preparing my defense. He gathered financial statements proving the company had grown by 30% under my management in the last 3 years. He got testimonials from satisfied clients who spoke of my professionalism and mental clarity. He hired a private investigator who discovered that Dr. Hartwell had lost his license in another state for issuing false diagnoses in exchange for money. We're going to destroy his credibility on the stand, my lawyer assured me with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. But I need you to understand something, Margaret. This is going to be brutal. They are going to attack you personally. They will say horrible things about you. I need you to stay calm no matter what. I practiced staying calm. I practiced not crying when Ryan screamed at me that I was selfish. I practiced not trembling when Vanessa would comment in front of visitors that I was losing my mind and that it was sad to see someone deteriorate like that. I practiced being made of stone when they would use Emma, my granddaughter, who was barely a year old, telling her to say bye-bye to Grandma as if I were about to die. Every day was a calculated emotional torture. But every night I listened to the new recordings the cameras captured. And in those recordings, Vanessa and Ryan were still careless, still talking openly about their plans, still digging their own grave without knowing it. One night, 2 weeks before the trial, I captured the most incriminating conversation of all. Ryan was on the phone with one of the employees who had agreed to lie. "Are you sure you're going to say exactly what we agreed on?" Ryan asked nervously. "I need you to say you saw my mother confused, that she forgot important meetings, that she signed documents without reading them." The employee's voice sounded hesitant on the other end. "Mr. Ryan, I don't feel comfortable lying in court. I could go to jail for perjury." "You're not going anywhere." Vanessa's voice cut in from the background. "We have lawyers. You just say what we told you to and collect your $5,000 or you can lose your job. You decide." There was a long silence. Finally, the employee sighed. "Okay, I'll do it. But I want the money before the trial." "You'll get it," Ryan promised. "Half now, half after you testify." When I heard that recording, I knew I had one. Not because I was happy to destroy my son, but because I finally had irrefutable proof that it was all a conspiracy. Attorney Bennett nearly jumped for joy when I showed it to him. "Margaret, with this, you don't just win the case. They are going to face very serious criminal charges. Bribery of witnesses, conspiracy to commit fraud, premeditated perjury. We're talking about potential years in prison. I just want to get back what's mine," I repeated like a mantra. "I just want this to be over." The days leading up to the trial were the hardest. Vanessa made sure to invite all the extended family, neighbors, and acquaintances to tell them her version of the story. "It's so sad to see Margaret like this," I would hear her say in a syrupy voice. "She refuses to accept she can't run the company anymore. Ryan just wants to protect her, protect his father's legacy, but she's become so stubborn, so paranoid. She even installed cameras in the house because she thinks we're stealing from her." It's heartbreaking. People would nod with sympathy. Some would look at me with pity when I ran into them at the grocery store or on the street. The narrative Vanessa had built was perfect. The old, confused mother versus the loving, concerned son. No one knew the truth. Not yet. The night before the trial, I couldn't sleep. I stayed awake looking at the photos of Thomas I kept on my nightstand. "I don't know if I'm doing the right thing," I whispered to his smiling image. "He's our son, Thomas, the boy we made together. But he's become someone I don't recognize. Someone who would have disappointed us both." In my mind, I could hear Thomas's voice telling me what he always said when we faced tough decisions. "Do the right thing, Maggie, even when it hurts. Especially when it hurts." And he was right. This was the right thing. Painful, devastating, but right. I couldn't let greed and lies win. I couldn't betray everything we had built just because the thief shared my blood. The next morning, I got up at 5. I took a cold shower to clear my head. I put on my best dark grey suit, the same one I had worn to the most important business meeting of my life 5 years earlier. I carefully applied my makeup, covering the dark circles from a sleepless night. I styled my silver hair into an elegant bun. When I looked in the mirror, I saw the woman Thomas had loved. Strong, dignified, unbreakable. I didn't see the frail old woman Vanessa and Ryan wanted the world to see. I saw a warrior prepared for the most important battle of her life. Attorney Bennett picked me up at 7 o'clock. In the car, we went over the strategy one last time. They'll present their case first, he explained. They'll bring on their doctor, their paid-off witnesses. They're going to paint a picture of you as incompetent. You must remain calm. Don't react. Don't cry. Present yourself exactly as you are, a smart, capable, and coherent businesswoman. And when do we present the recordings? I asked. At the very end, after they have completely buried themselves in their own lies, after they have sworn under oath that everything they're saying is the truth, then we will destroy them with their own words. We arrived at the courthouse half an hour early. The building was imposing with marble columns and hallways that smelled of history and justice. Ryan and Vanessa were already there, accompanied by their lawyer, a young man in an expensive suit with a shark-like smile. When they saw me, Vanessa whispered something in Ryan's ear. He looked at me and smirked, a cruel smirk that said, "We've already won." I didn't smile back. I just walked with my head held high to my place, feeling the weight of all the eyes in the room. The courtroom gradually filled up. I recognized some employees from the company, curious neighbors, and even a few clients. Vanessa had done her PR work well. Half the room seemed to be on their side, looking at me with either pity or judgment. But I also saw some friendly faces. Patricia, my accountant of 20 years, who knew every number in the company better than anyone. Frank, the site foreman, who had worked with Thomas from the very beginning. People who knew the truth, people who supported me. At 9 o'clock sharp, the bailiff asked everyone to rise. All rise, the Honorable Judge Harrison presiding. And there he was, the judge, the man who would decide my fate. He was about 60 years old, with completely silver hair and a serious but not unkind expression. He sat at his bench, adjusted his glasses, and looked at both sides of the room. "We are here today for the case of Ryan Contreras versus Margaret Contreras," he began in a clear voice. "A petition to declare Mrs. Margaret Contreras incompetent to manage her assets and her company with a request to transfer administration to the plaintiff. Are both legal teams ready to proceed?" "Yes, Your Honor," both lawyers replied in unison. "Very well. The plaintiff may proceed with their case." Ryan's lawyer stood up, adjusted his wine-colored tie, and began his opening statement with the performance of a seasoned actor. "Your Honor, members of the court, we are here today for a heartbreaking reason. A son who loves his mother must make the most difficult decision of his life, to protect her from herself. Margaret Contreras was at one time a capable businesswoman. But the years take their toll, and sadly, Mrs. Contreras is showing clear signs of cognitive decline. I felt rage bubble up in my stomach, but I kept my face neutral. Attorney Bennett had said to remain calm, so I took a deep breath and sat as still as a statue. "We will present medical evidence," Ryan's lawyer continued. "Testimony from employees, records of financial errors, and the genuine concern of a son who only wants to preserve his father's legacy while taking care of his mother." His father's legacy. What a hypocrite. Thomas would be turning in his grave if he could see this. The first witness they called was Dr. Hartwell, a man in his 50s with gold-rimmed glasses and a condescending smile that made my blood boil. He swore to tell the truth with his hand on the Bible and then sat with the posture of someone who believes his words are unquestionable. "Dr. Hartwell, could you tell the court your specialty?" Ryan's lawyer asked. "I am a geriatric psychiatrist. I specialize in cognitive disorders in older adults, particularly dementia and Alzheimer's disease." "And did you have the opportunity to evaluate Mrs. Margaret Contreras?" "Yes, indirectly. Based on the detailed reports her son Ryan provided to me, I was able to determine that she presents signs consistent with early cognitive decline." Attorney Bennett was writing furiously on his legal pad, but didn't object. He had told me to wait, to let them dig their own grave. "What kind of symptoms did you observe?" The questioning continued. "Confusion with dates and numbers, erratic financial decision-making, frequent forgetfulness, sudden mood swings, all consistent with the early stages of senile dementia. Lies. Every word was a venomous lie. But I sat there, my hands folded in my lap, breathing slowly. And in your professional opinion, Is Mrs. Contreras fit to run a company? In my professional opinion, no. She represents a risk to herself and to those who depend on the company. When Attorney Bennett stood up for the cross-examination, the atmosphere changed. Dr. Hartwell, you mentioned you evaluated my client indirectly. That means you never actually met her in person, correct? The doctor hesitated for a second. That's correct. But her son's reports were very detailed. And are you aware that evaluating a patient without meeting them in person violates the ethical standards of your profession? Well, in special circumstances. Are you aware that you lost your license in the state of Nevada in 2018 for issuing false diagnoses in exchange for financial compensation? The silence in the room was absolute. Dr. Hartwell turned pale. That was a misunderstanding that was resolved. A misunderstanding. I have the official ruling here. It clearly states your license was revoked for unethical conduct. How much were you paid for this diagnosis, doctor? Objection, shouted Ryan's lawyer. Speculation. I withdraw the question, Attorney Bennett said with a smile. No further questions for this witness. Dr. Hartwell left the stand sweating, his credibility destroyed. I saw Ryan and Vanessa exchange nervous glances. The first pillar of their case had just crumbled. Then they called Derek and Stephen, the two employees. One by one they repeated their rehearsed lines, that they had seen me confused, that I had signed documents without reading them, that I forgot important meetings. They spoke with trembling voices, avoiding my gaze. When Attorney Bennett cross-examined them, they fell apart like sand castles. How much were you paid for this testimony? He asked directly. No one paid me anything, Derek lied, but the crack in his voice gave him away. Are you sure? Because I have evidence of a transfer of $2,500 from Ryan Contreras' account to yours exactly 1 week ago. Derek swallowed audibly. Stephen couldn't even maintain the lie under pressure. $5,000, he finally admitted in a barely audible voice. They promised me $5,000 if I said what they wanted. The murmuring in the courtroom was like the buzz of a beehive. Judge Harrison banged his gavel, calling for order. Vanessa had lost all composure, her face a mask of fury. Ryan was staring at the floor as if he wanted it to swallow him whole. Finally, they called Ryan to the stand. My son, my only son. He swore to tell the truth and sat down with that perfected victim expression. Ryan, why did you initiate this legal process against your mother? His lawyer asked gently. Because I love her. Because I don't want to see her destroy everything my father built. She's not the same person anymore. She's changed. She makes irrational decisions. She spends money on unnecessary things. Can you give us some examples? Last month, she spent $30,000 renovating the office when it wasn't necessary. She hired 3 new employees without consulting me, inflating our operating costs, and she refuses to modernize our processes because she's stuck in her old ways. Every word sounded convincing if you didn't know the truth. And what do you hope to achieve with this process? I just want my mother to be able to retire with dignity, to enjoy her final years without the stress of the company, and for the business my father loved to continue growing under younger, more prepared management. When it was Attorney Bennett's turn, he rose slowly like a lion preparing to strike. Ryan, you said you love your mother. Is that correct? Yes, of course. And is that why you siphoned almost $200,000 from the company accounts without her authorization? The color drained from Ryan's face. I did not. That's not. I have the bank records right here. Transfers to shell accounts, fake invoices, payments to non-existent companies. Do you deny making these transactions? Those were legitimate investments, Ryan stammered. Investments or theft? Objection. I'll allow the question, Judge Harrison said firmly. Ryan was breathing heavily. It's not theft to take what belongs to me by right. But the company doesn't belong to you, does it? It's registered 100% in Margaret Contreras' name. It should be mine. My father founded it. Your father founded it with your mother, and when he died, she kept it alive. She made it grow. That's not how it was. Ryan clenched his jaw. She got lucky. Lucky. The company grew by 30% in 3 years under her management. Is that luck or competence? Ryan didn't answer. Let me ask you another question. Did you say to your mother, and I quote, "I will take the house, the company, and you will be left with nothing"? I never said that, Ryan lied, looking me directly in the eye. Are you sure? You never said those words. Never. Attorney Bennett smiled, the smile I had been waiting for. Your Honor, in that case, I would like to present new evidence. Judge Harrison leaned forward. What kind of evidence, Counselor? Audio recordings, Your Honor. Legally obtained from my client's private property, documenting the true nature of this case. Ryan's lawyer shot to his feet. Objection, Your Honor. This evidence was not disclosed during discovery. It cannot be admitted at this stage. Your Honor, Attorney Bennett countered smoothly. These recordings directly contradict sworn testimony we just heard. Mr. Contreras has committed perjury by denying statements he made. This evidence is directly relevant to the credibility of the plaintiff. Judge Harrison considered for a moment, his eyes moving between both lawyers, then to Ryan's pale face. I'll allow it. But Counselor, this had better be relevant. It is, Your Honor. Very relevant. Attorney Bennett walked to his briefcase and pulled out a manila envelope and a small digital recorder. The courtroom fell into complete silence. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. Vanessa was gripping the edge of the table so hard her knuckles had turned white. Your Honor, for the past 3 months, my client has been documenting conversations in her own home. What you're about to hear will prove that this entire case is not about a concerned son protecting his aging mother. It's about fraud, extortion, and a calculated scheme to steal everything Mrs. Contreras has worked for. He handed copies of transcripts to the judge and to Ryan's lawyer. The first recording is from the night Mr. Contreras received our letter demanding the return of the fraudulently obtained funds. Attorney Bennett pressed play. The courtroom speakers crackled to life, and then my voice filled the room, trembling but clear. A son who is stealing from me. A son who plans to have me declared insane to take everything I've worked for. Then Ryan's voice, sharp and venomous. Because it's mine by right. Dad would have wanted it this way. And then, unmistakably, crystal clear, we are going to destroy you, Mom. We will take everything from you. The house, the company, your dignity, everything. The silence that followed was deafening. Every eye in the courtroom was fixed on Ryan, whose face had gone from pale to a mottled red. Judge Harrison looked at Ryan with an expression of profound disappointment. Mr. Contreras, is that your voice? Ryan opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again. Yes, but I was upset. She had, answer yes or no. Is that your voice? Yes. And did you threaten to take everything from your mother? Ryan's jaw worked. Yes, but... There's more, Your Honor, Attorney Bennett interrupted. He played the second recording. Vanessa's voice came through, cold and calculating. In 2 months, this will all be ours. The old woman has no options. Either she signs voluntarily or we have her declared incompetent. We win either way. The gasps in the courtroom were audible. Several people in the gallery leaned forward, straining to hear every word. Then Ryan's voice, what if she fights back? Vanessa's laugh was chilling even through the speakers. She can't fight back. Dr. Hartwell has already prepared the psychiatric report. It'll say she has early onset dementia, that she's unfit to make financial decisions. No judge will side with a woman her age against us. Judge Harrison's expression had gone from disappointed to furious. He held up his hand. Stop the recording. The courtroom fell silent. The judge turned to Dr. Hartwell, who was still seated in the gallery. Dr. Hartwell, did you hear that? The doctor stood shakily. Your Honor, I can explain. Sit down. I'll deal with you shortly. The judge turned back to Attorney Bennett. Continue. The recording resumed. Vanessa's voice, and the lawyer reviewing the documents won't notice the signatures are forged. Ryan, honey, your mother is 63 years old. Her signature isn't as steady as it used to be. It's perfectly believable that she signed those documents in a moment of confusion. Besides, we have witnesses who will say they saw her sign them. What witnesses? The ones I hired, obviously. 2 employees who need the money and will say exactly what I tell them to say. For $5,000 each, they'll swear to whatever is necessary. The judge's hand came down on his bench with a crack that made everyone jump. Enough. Attorney Bennett stopped the recording. The silence in the courtroom was absolute, broken only by someone's strangled sob. I realized it was coming from the gallery. One of the neighbors, Vanessa, had convinced I was losing my mind. Judge Harrison removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes. When he looked up, his gaze was steel. Counselor, do you have more? Yes, Your Honor. One more recording that directly implicates the witnesses in perjury. Play it. The final recording began. Ryan's nervous voice. Are you sure you're going to say exactly what we agreed on? I need you to say you saw my mother confused, that she forgot important meetings, that she signed documents without reading them. The employee's hesitant response. Mr. Ryan, I don't feel comfortable lying in court. I could go to jail for perjury. Vanessa's voice, sharp as a blade. You're not going anywhere. We have lawyers. You just say what we told you to and collect your $5,000, or you can lose your job. You decide. When the recording ended, Judge Harrison sat back in his chair. His face was a mask of controlled fury. He looked at Ryan, then at Vanessa, then at their lawyer, who looked like he wanted to disappear through the floor. In 30 years on the bench, Judge Harrison began, his voice quiet but carrying to every corner of the room, I have seen many disturbing cases. But this is beyond disturbing. This is one of the most calculated, malicious conspiracies I have ever witnessed. He turned to Ryan. Mr. Contreras, you sat on that stand and lied under oath. You looked me in the eye and denied saying things we just heard you say, clear as day. Ryan tried to speak, but Judge Harrison held up his hand. You will remain silent. He turned to Vanessa. Mrs. Contreras, you orchestrated this entire scheme. You fabricated medical evidence. You bribed witnesses. You forged signatures. You conspired to have a perfectly capable woman declared incompetent so you could steal everything she has. Vanessa's face was streaked with tears, but Judge Harrison showed no sympathy. And Dr. Hartwell, the judge continued, his gaze finding the psychiatrist in the gallery, you provided a false diagnosis without ever meeting the patient, despite having already lost your license once for the exact same unethical behavior. He turned to Derek and Stephen, who were sitting together, both looking terrified. And you too accepted money to commit perjury in a court of law. Judge Harrison took a deep breath, composing himself. I am ready to issue my ruling. The entire courtroom seemed to hold its breath. In the case of Ryan Contreras versus Margaret Contreras, I find that the petition not only lacks merit, but was filed with malicious and fraudulent intent. Mrs. Margaret Contreras has proven herself to be a competent, coherent, and perfectly capable businesswoman. The evidence presented by the plaintiff is not only insufficient, it has been deliberately fabricated with intent to defraud. He paused, letting his words sink in. Therefore, I dismiss this lawsuit in its entirety. Mrs. Margaret Contreras maintains absolute control of her company and all her properties. I felt tears begin to roll down my cheeks, but I kept my composure. Furthermore, Judge Harrison continued, his voice growing harder. I order Mr. Ryan Contreras to immediately return the $200,000 siphoned from the business accounts, plus interest calculated at the legal rate, within 30 days. Vanessa let out a choked sob. Ryan sat frozen, staring at nothing. But that is not all, the judge said, and his tone made everyone in the room sit up straighter. I have heard clear and irrefutable evidence of multiple crimes. Financial fraud, forgery, witness tampering, perjury, conspiracy to commit fraud. I am immediately referring this case to the District Attorney's Office for criminal prosecution of Ryan Contreras and Vanessa Contreras. Your Honor, please. Vanessa cried out, jumping to her feet. We have a daughter. A baby. Judge Harrison's expression didn't soften. You should have thought of your daughter before you conspired to destroy her grandmother and commit multiple felonies. Children deserve parents who teach them integrity, not greed and deception. He turned to me then, and for the first time, his severe expression softened slightly. Mrs. Contreras, I am deeply sorry you had to endure this ordeal. No mother should face such betrayal from her own child. But I want you to know that justice has been served today. Thank you, Your Honor, I managed to say, my voice breaking. Judge Harrison nodded. Furthermore, I am issuing a restraining order. Mr. Ryan Contreras and Mrs. Vanessa Contreras have 72 hours to vacate Mrs. Margaret Contreras's property. They are not to approach her, contact her, or come within 500 feet of her or her business. Any violation will result in immediate arrest. This is insane. Vanessa screamed. Where are we supposed to go? What about Emma? You should have considered that before you attempted to steal your mother-in-law's home, Judge Harrison replied coldly. This court has no sympathy for those who commit fraud and then complain about the consequences. He turned to the bailiff. Officer, please escort Mr. and Mrs. Contreras from this courtroom. They are to remain available to the district attorney's office for questioning. 2 officers approached Ryan and Vanessa. My son finally looked up and met my eyes. In them, I saw something I hadn't seen in years, real fear, and perhaps, buried deep, a flicker of regret. Mom, he said, his voice cracking as an officer took his arm. Mom, please. For a moment, just one moment, that maternal instinct that never fully dies made me want to run to him, to hold him like I did when he was small and frightened. But then I remembered his words, we are going to destroy you, Mom. We will take everything from you. I remembered Vanessa's cruel smile, her calculated manipulation, the months of humiliation and fear. And I remained seated, looking at him with sadness but also with resolve. You had many chances to do the right thing, Ryan, I said quietly. You made your choices. Now you have to face the consequences. The officers led them toward the door. Vanessa was still screaming about injustice, about Emma, about how this would ruin their lives. But her voice faded as they exited the courtroom. Judge Harrison banged his gavel. This court is adjourned. As people began to file out, Attorney Bennett came over and placed a hand on my shoulder. We did it, Margaret. We won. It doesn't feel like winning, I admitted, wiping my tears. It feels like I just lost my son. You didn't lose your son, Attorney Bennett said gently. He lost himself. You just refused to lose everything else along with him. Your husband would be proud of you. Those words broke me. I cried then, openly, releasing years of pain and betrayal. Patricia came and wrapped her arms around me. Frank was there too, his weathered face lined with emotion. We knew the truth, Margaret, Patricia said softly. We always knew. I'm just sorry you had to go through this to prove it. Thank you, I whispered. Thank you for standing by me. As I left the courtroom that day, I passed by several of the neighbors and acquaintances Vanessa had poisoned against me. Some looked away in shame. Others met my eyes with apologies written on their faces. One woman, Mrs. Chen from down the street, stopped me. Mrs. Margaret, I'm so sorry. Vanessa told us you were confused, that Ryan was just trying to help. We had no idea. It's all right, I said, though it wasn't really. She fooled a lot of people. She was very good at it. Outside, the sun was shining. It seemed wrong somehow that the day should be so beautiful when my heart felt so broken. But as I stood on the courthouse steps, breathing in the fresh air, I realized something. I was free. Free from the constant tension, the manipulation, the fear. Free from wondering when the next attack would come. Free to run my company the way Thomas and I had built it, with honesty, integrity, and pride. The victory was bittersweet, but it was victory nonetheless. And as Attorney Bennett had said, Thomas would be proud. I had done the right thing, even when it hurt. Especially when it hurt. And he was right. This was the right thing. Painful, devastating, but right. I couldn't let greed and lies win. I couldn't betray everything we had built just because the thief shared my blood. The next morning, I got up at 5. I took a cold shower to clear my head. I put on my best dark grey suit, the same one I had worn to the most important business meeting of my life 5 years earlier. I carefully applied my makeup, covering the dark circles from a sleepless night. I styled my silver hair into an elegant bun. When I looked in the mirror, I saw the woman Thomas had loved. Strong, dignified, unbreakable. I didn't see the frail old woman Vanessa and Ryan wanted the world to see. I saw a warrior prepared for the most important battle of her life. Attorney Bennett picked me up at 7 o'clock. In the car, we went over the strategy one last time. They'll present their case first, he explained. They'll bring on their doctor, their paid-off witnesses. They're going to paint a picture of you as incompetent. You must remain calm. Don't react. Don't cry. Present yourself exactly as you are, a smart, capable, and coherent businesswoman. And when do we present the recordings? I asked. At the very end, after they have completely buried themselves in their own lies, after they have sworn under oath that everything they're saying is the truth, then we will destroy them with their own words. We arrived at the courthouse half an hour early. The building was imposing with marble columns and hallways that smelled of history and justice. Ryan and Vanessa were already there, accompanied by their lawyer, a young man in an expensive suit with a shark-like smile. When they saw me, Vanessa whispered something in Ryan's ear. He looked at me and smirked, a cruel smirk that said, "We've already won." I didn't smile back. I just walked with my head held high to my place, feeling the weight of all the eyes in the room. The courtroom gradually filled up. I recognized some employees from the company, curious neighbors, and even a few clients. Vanessa had done her PR work well. Half the room seemed to be on their side, looking at me with either pity or judgment. But I also saw some friendly faces. Patricia, my accountant of 20 years, who knew every number in the company better than anyone. Frank, the site foreman, who had worked with Thomas from the very beginning. People who knew the truth, people who supported me. At 9 o'clock sharp, the bailiff asked everyone to rise. All rise, the Honorable Judge Harrison presiding. And there he was, the judge, the man who would decide my fate. He was about 60 years old, with completely silver hair and a serious but not unkind expression. He sat at his bench, adjusted his glasses, and looked at both sides of the room. "We are here today for the case of Ryan Lawson versus Margaret Lawson," he began in a clear voice. "A petition to declare Mrs. Margaret Lawson incompetent to manage her assets and her company with a request to transfer administration to the plaintiff. Are both legal teams ready to proceed?" "Yes, Your Honor," both lawyers replied in unison. "Very well. The plaintiff may proceed with their case." Ryan's lawyer stood up, adjusted his wine-colored tie, and began his opening statement with the performance of a seasoned actor. "Your Honor, members of the court, we are here today for a heartbreaking reason. A son who loves his mother must make the most difficult decision of his life, to protect her from herself. Margaret Lawson was at one time a capable businesswoman. But the years take their toll, and sadly, Mrs. Lawson is showing clear signs of cognitive decline. I felt rage bubble up in my stomach, but I kept my face neutral. Attorney Bennett had said to remain calm, so I took a deep breath and sat as still as a statue. "We will present medical evidence," Ryan's lawyer continued. "Testimony from employees, records of financial errors, and the genuine concern of a son who only wants to preserve his father's legacy while taking care of his mother, his father's legacy. What a hypocrite. Thomas would be turning in his grave if he could see this." The first witness they called was Dr. Hartwell, a man in his 50s with gold-rimmed glasses and a condescending smile that made my blood boil. He swore to tell the truth with his hand on the Bible and then sat with the posture of someone who believes his words are unquestionable. "Dr. Hartwell, could you tell the court your specialty?" Ryan's lawyer asked. "I am a geriatric psychiatrist. I specialize in cognitive disorders in older adults, particularly dementia and Alzheimer's disease. And did you have the opportunity to evaluate Mrs. Margaret Lawson?" "Yes, indirectly. Based on the detailed reports her son Ryan provided to me, I was able to determine that she presents signs consistent with early cognitive decline." Attorney Bennett was writing furiously on his legal pad, but didn't object. He had told me to wait, to let them dig their own grave. "What kind of symptoms did you observe?" The questioning continued. "Confusion with dates and numbers, erratic financial decision-making, frequent forgetfulness, sudden mood swings, all consistent with the early stages of senile dementia. Lies. Every word was a venomous lie. But I sat there, my hands folded in my lap, breathing slowly. And in your professional opinion, is Mrs. Lawson fit to run a company? In my professional opinion, no. She represents a risk to herself and to those who depend on the company. When Attorney Bennett stood up for the cross-examination, the atmosphere changed. Dr. Hartwell, you mentioned you evaluated my client indirectly. That means you never actually met her in person, correct? The doctor hesitated for a second. That's correct. But her son's reports were very detailed. And are you aware that evaluating a patient without meeting them in person violates the ethical standards of your profession? Well, in special circumstances, are you aware that you lost your license in the state of Nevada in 2018 for issuing false diagnoses in exchange for financial compensation? The silence in the room was absolute. Dr. Hartwell turned pale. That was a misunderstanding that was resolved. A misunderstanding. I have the official ruling here. It clearly states your license was revoked for unethical conduct. How much were you paid for this diagnosis, doctor? Objection, shouted Ryan's lawyer. Speculation. I withdraw the question, Attorney Bennett said with a smile. No further questions for this witness. Dr. Hartwell left the stand sweating, his credibility destroyed. I saw Ryan and Vanessa exchange nervous glances. The first pillar of their case had just crumbled. Then they called the two employees. One by one, Derek and Stephen repeated their rehearsed lines, that they had seen me confused, that I had signed documents without reading them, that I forgot important meetings. They spoke with trembling voices, avoiding my gaze. When Attorney Bennett cross-examined them, they fell apart like sand castles. How much were you paid for this testimony? He asked directly. No one paid me anything, Derek lied, but the crack in his voice gave him away. Are you sure? Because I have evidence of a transfer of $2,500 from Ryan Lawson's account to yours exactly 1 week ago. The employee swallowed audibly. Stephen couldn't even maintain the lie under pressure. $5,000, he finally admitted in a barely audible voice. They promised me $5,000 if I said what they wanted. The murmuring in the courtroom was like the buzz of a beehive. The judge banged his gavel, calling for order. Vanessa had lost all composure, her face a mask of fury. Ryan was staring at the floor as if he wanted it to swallow him whole. Finally, they called Ryan to the stand. My son, my only son. He swore to tell the truth and sat down with that perfected victim expression. Ryan, why did you initiate this legal process against your mother? His lawyer asked gently. Because I love her. Because I don't want to see her destroy everything my father built. She's not the same person anymore. She's changed. She makes irrational decisions. She spends money on unnecessary things. Can you give us some examples? Last month, she spent $30,000 renovating the office when it wasn't necessary. She hired 3 new employees without consulting me, inflating our operating costs. And she refuses to modernize our processes because she's stuck in her old ways. Every word sounded convincing if you didn't know the truth. And what do you hope to achieve with this process? I just want my mother to be able to retire with dignity, to enjoy her final years without the stress of the company, and for the business my father loved to continue growing under younger, more prepared management. When it was Attorney Bennett's turn, he rose slowly like a lion preparing to strike. Ryan, you said you love your mother. Is that correct? Yes, of course. And is that why you siphoned almost $200,000 from the company accounts without her authorization? The color drained from Ryan's face. I did not. That's not. I have the bank records right here. Transfers to shell accounts, fake invoices, payments to non-existent companies. Do you deny making these transactions? Those were legitimate investments, Ryan stammered. Investments or theft? Objection. I'll allow the question, the judge said firmly. Ryan was breathing heavily. It's not theft to take what belongs to me by right. But the company doesn't belong to you, does it? It's registered 100% in Margaret Lawson's name. It should be mine. My father founded it. Your father founded it with your mother, and when he died, she kept it alive. She made it grow. That's not how it was, Ryan clenched his jaw. She got lucky. Lucky. The company grew by 30% in 3 years under her management. Is that luck or competence? Ryan didn't answer. Let me ask you another question. Did you say to your mother, and I quote, "Don't you cry now. I will take the house, the company, and you will be left with nothing"? I never said that, Ryan lied, looking me directly in the eye. Are you sure? You never said those words. Never. Attorney Bennett smiled, the smile I had been waiting for. Your Honor, in that case, I would like to present new evidence. Attorney Bennett walked to his briefcase and pulled out a thick manila envelope. The silence in the courtroom was so dense, I could hear my own heart beating. Ryan had gone rigid on the stand. Vanessa was leaning forward in her seat, her knuckles white from gripping the edge of the table. Your Honor, Attorney Bennett began in a clear voice. For the past 3 months, my client has been systematically documenting conversations that prove this case is not about filial concern. It is about fraud, conspiracy, and extortion. He handed the envelope to Judge Harrison, who opened it with a serious expression. Inside were transcripts of the recordings, screenshots of bank transfers, and a USB drive with the full audio files. Objection, Your Honor. Ryan's lawyer shot to his feet. This evidence was not presented during discovery. It cannot be admitted. It was obtained legally on my client's private property, Attorney Bennett countered. And it directly pertains to the sworn testimony we just heard. Mr. Lawson has just committed perjury by denying he said certain words. This evidence proves it. The judge reviewed the documents for what felt like an eternity. Finally, he looked up. I will allow the evidence. Proceed. Attorney Bennett connected the drive to the courtroom's audio system. What you are about to hear is a conversation recorded in Mrs. Margaret Lawson's home 3 days before this lawsuit was filed. The first audio clip began to play. It was my voice, trembling but clear, confronting Ryan about the fraudulent transfers, and then his response, the one he had denied seconds before. Don't you cry now, Mom. I will take the house. I will take the company, and you will be left with nothing. The silence that followed was absolute. All eyes were fixed on Ryan, whose face had gone from white to a deep red. Is that your voice, Ryan? The judge asked directly. Ryan opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Answer the question, the judge insisted, his tone severe. Yes, he finally admitted, his voice barely a whisper. But I was angry. She had accused me unfairly. There's more, Attorney Bennett interrupted. He played the second recording. The conversation between Ryan and Vanessa, planning to use false witnesses. Vanessa's voice was unmistakable. For $5,000 each, they'll swear to whatever is necessary. The murmur in the room grew into open gasps. The judge had to bang his gavel 3 times to restore order. Vanessa had jumped to her feet, her face a mess of shock and rage. Those recordings are illegal. That's an invasion of privacy. They were made on my client's private property, Attorney Bennett repeated. Completely legal. And there's more. He played the third recording. Vanessa saying, the old woman has no options. Either she signs voluntarily or we have her declared incompetent. We win either way. Then the fourth, Ryan talking to the employee about the $5,000 payment for false testimony. And finally, the most devastating one, Vanessa laughing and saying, Dr. Hartwell has already prepared the fake psychiatric report. It'll say she has dementia. No judge will side with a woman her age against us. When the last audio clip ended, the silence was sepulchral. Judge Harrison was staring at Ryan and Vanessa with an expression that mixed disbelief and disgust. Your Honor, Ryan's lawyer said, trying to recover. These recordings were obtained without consent. On Mrs. Lawson's private property, the judge cut him off. We've already established that. And what I have just heard is not only morally reprehensible, it is criminal. He turned to Ryan, who still sat on the stand looking like a cornered animal. Mr. Lawson, do you have anything to say in your defense? Ryan looked at me then for the first time in months. He really looked at me, and in his eyes, I saw something that might have been regret or maybe just terror at the consequences. I just wanted what was mine, he said, his voice cracking. My father founded that company. I'm his son. It should be mine. Your father founded it with your mother, the judge replied harshly. And according to the documents I've reviewed, when your father died, that company was valued at $350,000. Today, it's worth over $2 million. Who do you think created that value? Your father's ghost or the woman who worked day and night for 11 years? Ryan had no answer. The judge leaned back in his chair and began to review all the documents in front of him. 5 minutes passed. 10. 15. No one dared to speak. Finally, the judge looked up and his gaze landed on me. Mrs. Lawson, would you like to say anything before I issue my decision? I stood up slowly. My legs were shaking, but my voice came out steady. Your Honor, I just want to say that for 30 years, I built a life with the man I loved. When he died, I thought my world had ended. But I kept going for my son because I believed he would honor his father's memory. I worked myself to exhaustion to give him a future. And what I received in return was betrayal, theft, and humiliation. I paused, feeling tears threatening to fall, but I held them back. I'm not seeking revenge. I just want back what belongs to me, what I earned with my own hard work, and I want justice to be done. The judge nodded slowly. Mrs. Lawson, you may be seated. I sat down, feeling all eyes on me. The judge steepled his fingers under his chin, thinking. In my 30 years in the judicial system, he began, I have seen many unpleasant cases, but few have disgusted me as much as this one. What we have just witnessed is not a son concerned for his mother. It is a flagrant case of greed, manipulation, and fraud. He turned to Ryan and Vanessa. You two fabricated medical evidence. You bribed witnesses. You siphoned funds. And you plotted to have a perfectly capable woman declared incompetent just to steal everything she has. Do you know what that tells me? That you have absolutely no respect for the law, for the truth, or for the bonds of family. Vanessa tried to speak. Your Honor, if you'll let me explain. No. The judge cut her off, his voice like steel. I have heard quite enough from you and your explanations. Every word that comes out of your mouth is a calculated lie. He turned to Ryan's lawyer. I suggest you advise your clients to remain silent because every additional word will only worsen their situation. The lawyer nodded nervously and whispered something to Ryan, who had started to tremble visibly. Judge Harrison opened the envelope my lawyer had given him and began to read the full transcripts of the recordings. His expression grew more severe with each page. Finally, he closed the folder and looked directly at Ryan. Mr. Lawson, at some point in your life, your mother taught you about honesty, hard work, and respect. Clearly, you chose to ignore all of those lessons. Ryan lowered his head, unable to meet the judge's gaze. And Mrs. Vanessa, the judge continued. You not only manipulated your husband into betraying his own mother, you orchestrated this entire fraud. The recordings make that perfectly clear. Vanessa had begun to cry, but they were tears of panic, not remorse. Your Honor, I have a small child, she pleaded. Please think of her. You should have thought of your daughter before you conspired to commit multiple felonies, the judge replied without a shred of compassion. Children deserve parents who teach them values, not greed. He turned to the entire courtroom. I have heard enough. I am ready to issue my verdict. The silence was absolute. Even breathing seemed to have stopped in the room. In the case of Ryan Lawson versus Margaret Lawson, the judge began in a powerful voice. I find that not only does the petition lack merit, but it was filed with malicious and fraudulent intent. Judge Harrison continued, his voice firm and clear, resonating in every corner of the room. Mrs. Margaret Lawson has proven herself to be a competent, coherent, and perfectly capable businesswoman, fully able to manage her assets. The evidence presented by the plaintiff is not only insufficient, but has been deliberately fabricated with the intent to defraud. Ryan had dropped his head into his hands. Vanessa was trembling visibly in her seat. Therefore, I dismiss this lawsuit in its entirety. Mrs. Margaret Lawson maintains absolute control of her company and her properties. Furthermore, I order Mr. Ryan Lawson to immediately return the $200,000 siphoned from the business accounts, plus interest. The judge paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. Then his expression hardened even more. But that is not all. I have heard clear evidence of multiple crimes, financial fraud, forgery, witness tampering, perjury, and conspiracy to commit fraud. I am immediately referring this case to the District Attorney's Office for criminal charges to be filed against Ryan Lawson and Vanessa Lawson. Vanessa's strangled gasp echoed in the room. No, Your Honor, please. Silence, the judge ordered, banging his gavel. You had multiple opportunities to do the right thing. Instead, you chose to lie under oath, to fabricate evidence, and to conspire to destroy an innocent woman. The consequences of those choices are yours to bear. He turned to me then, and for the first time, his expression softened slightly. Mrs. Lawson, I am deeply sorry you had to go through this. No mother should ever face such a betrayal, but I want you to know that justice, though delayed, has been served today. I felt the tears finally roll down my cheeks, not of sadness, but of relief, of validation, of justice. Thank you, Your Honor, I managed to say, my voice trembling. The judge nodded respectfully. Furthermore, I am issuing a restraining order. Mr. Ryan Lawson and Mrs. Vanessa Lawson have 72 hours to vacate the property of Mrs. Margaret Lawson. They are not to approach her or contact her in any way. Any violation of this order will result in immediate arrest. Vanessa leaped to her feet, screaming, "This is unfair. We have a daughter. Where are we supposed to live? You should have considered that before you conspired to steal the house from your mother-in-law," the judge replied with absolute coldness. This court has no sympathy for those who commit fraud and then complain about the consequences. He turned to the bailiff. "Officer, please escort Mr. and Mrs. Lawson from this courtroom and keep them under supervision until the DA's office determines if immediate detention is necessary." 2 officers approached Ryan and Vanessa. My son finally looked up and met my eyes. In them was something I hadn't seen in years. Real fear. "Mom," he said, his voice cracking as the officers took his arm. "Mom, please." For a moment, just one moment, the maternal instinct that never fully dies made me want to run to him. But then I remembered his words. "Don't you cry. I will take everything." I remembered Vanessa's cruel smile. I remembered the months of humiliation. And I sat still looking at him with a mixture of sadness and resolve. "You had many chances to do the right thing, Ryan," I said calmly. "You chose the path you're on. Now you have to face the consequences." The officers led them away as Vanessa continued to scream about injustice, about her daughter, about how this would ruin their lives. But her screams faded as they left the courtroom. And finally, after months of nightmare, there was silence. Attorney Bennett came over and placed a hand on my shoulder. "We did it, Margaret. We won." "It doesn't feel like a victory," I admitted, wiping my tears. "It feels like a loss." "It's both," he said gently. "But you did the right thing and your husband would be proud of you." Those words broke me. I cried then openly, releasing years of pain, betrayal, and loneliness. Patricia, my accountant, came and hugged me. Frank, the foreman, was there too with tears in his own eyes. "We always knew the truth, Margaret," Patricia said. "We always knew you were strong, honest, and capable. I'm just sorry you had to go through this to prove it." "Thank you," I whispered. "Thank you for being here." The following days were a whirlwind of legal activity. The district attorney's office filed formal charges against Ryan and Vanessa. First-degree fraud, forgery, witness tampering, conspiracy. They were facing a potential 5 to 10 years in prison. Their lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal, but I held firm, not for revenge, but for justice. I couldn't let them get away with it. The world needed to see that actions have consequences, even when committed by your own blood. Ryan and Vanessa were processed and released on $100,000 bail each. I didn't pay it. I didn't lift a finger to help them. They had to sell the luxury car Vanessa loved so much. It was a small irony that did not go unnoticed. During the eviction process, they returned to the house to collect their things. I wasn't there. I didn't want to see them. I didn't want to hear any more pleas or justifications. Patricia supervised everything, making sure they only took what was theirs. She told me Ryan asked for me several times, that he wanted to talk to me, that he needed to explain, but there was nothing to explain. The recordings had said it all. When I finally returned to my home 3 days later, it felt different, physically emptier, but emotionally lighter. The tension was gone from the air. There were no more hateful glares, just peace. A sad peace, but peace nonetheless. I walked through every room, reclaiming my space. In the room Ryan and Vanessa had occupied, I found a letter on the bed. The handwriting was Ryan's. For a moment, I considered throwing it away unread. But something made me open it. "Mom," it began. "I know I have no right to ask you for anything. I know I failed you in unforgivable ways. Vanessa convinced me that you were taking advantage of me, that you were denying me what was rightfully mine. But now I see that I was the one who let myself be blinded by greed. I don't expect your forgiveness. I just want you to know that a part of me, the part that still remembers being your son, is sorry. Take care of Emma if you ever get the chance. She's not to blame for any of this." He didn't sign the letter. There was no love or any other closing. It just ended there as abruptly as our relationship now was. I folded the letter and put it in a drawer. Maybe one day I would read it again. Maybe not. 6 months later, the criminal trial was over. Ryan took a plea deal and was sentenced to 3 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 18 months. Vanessa, who had been identified as the primary architect of the fraud, received 5 years with no chance of early release. Emma was placed in the temporary custody of Vanessa's parents. I tried to contact them to request visits with my granddaughter, but they made it clear I was not welcome. "You put our son-in-law in prison," Mrs. Whitmore told me over the phone. "You destroyed our family." "I didn't destroy anything," I replied calmly. "They made their choices. I just defended myself." She hung up without another word. And just like that, I lost my granddaughter, too. That pain will never completely go away. But life went on. I took back full control of my company. I implemented the changes Ryan had suggested that actually made sense. Because even though he was a thief, some of his ideas had been valid. I hired a new manager, a young man named Marcus, the son of an old friend of Thomas's, who worked with honesty and respect. The company grew another 20% that year. I established a scholarship fund in Thomas's name for the children of construction workers who wanted to go to college. I donated $100,000 to organizations that help elderly adults who are victims of financial abuse by family members. Because I discovered my story was not unique, that there were thousands of parents being stripped of everything by greedy children. And slowly, very slowly, I began to heal. Not entirely, never completely, but enough to sleep through the night again. Enough to smile again when I looked at photos of Thomas. Enough to know that I had done the right thing, even though it hurt. One afternoon, while going through papers in my office, I found an old photo. Thomas, an 8-year-old Ryan, and me on the site of our very first house. All of us smiling, full of hope and dreams. I gently caressed the photo, feeling the weight of time and decisions. I did the right thing, didn't I? I whispered to Thomas's image. And in my heart, I felt his answer. Always the same. Do the right thing, Maggie, even when it hurts. Because in the end, I learned something that took me 65 years to fully understand. True love isn't inherited through blood. It's built day by day with presence, with respect, with loyalty. My son shared my blood, but it was other people, Patricia, Frank, Attorney Bennett, who proved to be my true family. They were the ones who stayed when things got hard. They were the ones who supported me when I was broken. And although I lost my son in the process of saving myself, I gained something more valuable. My dignity. No one can take that from you unless you let them. And I decided not to let them. That was my real victory. Not the recovered money or the saved company. It was staying true to the values Thomas and I built together. That was the real karma. They dug their own grave with their lies.